Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It was a busy Friday night when Daniel, a college student working part-time at KFC, stayed late to cover a shift for a coworker. The restaurant was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and the smell of fried chicken lingering thickly in the air. He was in the back, wiping down the prep area, when he noticed the security monitor flicker. On the screen, the dining area was completely empty, except for a figure sitting at a corner table. At first, Daniel thought it was a late customer who hadn't left yet. But as he looked closer, he realized the figure wasn't moving at all. Its head was bowed, like it was staring at the table, but it didn't look like any ordinary person. Something about it was wrong. Its shape too stiff, its presence too unnatural. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. The figure was gone. Shaking off the feeling, Daniel told himself it was just his imagination. The night dragged on, and he started cleaning the deep fryer area. The hum of the machines masked any small noises until he heard it, a whisper. It wasn't coming from the kitchen, but from the front counter. "Don't leave." Daniel froze. His heart raced. He was alone. He ran to the counter, checking every corner, but there was nothing. The whisper came again, closer this time, almost behind him. He spun around, but the dining room was empty. That's when he noticed the smell, the fried chicken, but mixed with something metallic like blood. A chill ran down his spine as he saw a smear across the floor, leading toward the back storage room. Against every instinct, he followed it. The storage room door creaked as he opened it, and the smell hit him full force. The lights flickered, revealing a horrifying sight. A mannequin dressed in an old KFC uniform, slumped against the wall. Its head tilted unnaturally, eyes painted wide open in a grotesque stare, and the inside of its sleeves were smeared with something dark. Daniel stumbled back, heart pounding, when the whisper came one last time, right next to his ear. "You shouldn't have stayed." He ran out of the restaurant and never returned. Later, when the manager came in the next morning, the mannequin was gone. But the dark smears remained, and the security footage showed something that made everyone at the KFC in that town uneasy. A shadowy figure walking through the empty restaurant at night, always watching, always waiting. No one knows who or what it was, but Daniel swears he can still hear that whisper in his dreams. And every time he drives past that KFC, he can't shake the feeling that something inside is still waiting for the next person who stays too late.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 2.
It was a rainy Friday night when Marcus decided to grab some late-night KFC after a long shift. The parking lot was nearly empty, the neon sign flickering above the entrance as he walked in. Inside, the place smelled of fried chicken and something else, something faint, metallic. He brushed it off as the aroma of old grease, thinking too much about the long drive home. The cashier was a young woman, her smile a little too forced, her eyes darting nervously behind the counter. Marcus ordered his usual combo, 2 pieces of chicken, fries, and a soda. She rang it up quickly but didn't hand him his receipt, just nodded and motioned him to wait. The restaurant was eerily quiet. No chatter, no sizzling from the fryers, only the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. After a few minutes, Marcus noticed movement behind the kitchen doors. He thought it was a staff member cleaning up until he saw a shadow pass by, tall, thin, unnaturally fast. Then he heard a low, almost choking groan. He froze, trying to convince himself it was just a pipe or a faulty vent. The groan grew louder, followed by the sound of scraping metal. His stomach knotted. The cashier finally came back, carrying a tray. As she set it down, Marcus noticed her hands were trembling, smudged with dark streaks that weren't ketchup. "Everything okay?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "You shouldn't have come tonight," she whispered, barely audible over the flickering lights. Marcus laughed nervously, but the laughter died in his throat when he saw the reflection in the stainless steel counter. The kitchen door slowly opening, revealing dozens of red-stained gloves hanging from hooks and something moving inside that shouldn't have been alive. It wasn't human, and it wasn't chicken. He stumbled back, dropping his tray. The groaning grew into shrill, guttural screams. The young woman stepped closer, her face pale, lips quivering. "They like the smell of fear," she said, "and tonight they smell yours." Marcus bolted, slipping through the exit into the rainy night, heart pounding, eyes scanning the parking lot. When he looked back from his car, the neon KFC sign was flickering violently. Inside, the shadows moved unnaturally fast, pooling together like liquid darkness. The employees, or whatever they were, stared at him through the glass, grinning wide, impossibly wide. He never stepped inside that KFC again, but sometimes, when he drives past late at night, he swears he can hear faint scratching like nails against metal and the groans that started it all. Even now, when he eats KFC at home, he can't shake the feeling that something is watching him through the grease-stained windows, waiting for him to come back.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 3.
It was a sweltering summer evening when Sarah, a college student working her late shift at a small KFC on the outskirts of town, noticed something off. The restaurant was nearly empty, just the hum of the fryer and the occasional clatter of trays. But tonight, the air felt heavy, almost suffocating, like the space itself was holding its breath. Around 11 p.m., the doors slid open and a man walked in. He didn't look like a usual customer. His clothes were filthy, his eyes hollow, and he carried a strange, boxy cooler that rattled as he walked. He asked for the usual fried chicken meal, but kept glancing toward the kitchen with an intensity that made Sarah's skin crawl. The manager, busy cleaning tables, didn't notice, so she tried to ignore him. As she prepped the order, she caught a flicker of movement in the corner of the kitchen. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but then the shadow moved again, sliding along the wall, too fast, too silent. She spun around and realized the man had left his cooler on the floor by the counter. She didn't touch it, feeling a sudden, irrational dread. The fryer beeped, signaling that the chicken was done. She carried the trays to the counter and, trying to calm herself, handed them over. The man didn't move for a moment. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You forgot something inside." He pointed at the cooler. Sarah's stomach sank. She wanted to call the manager, wanted to back away, but something kept her rooted. Trembling, she slowly approached the cooler. She unlatched it and froze. Inside were raw pieces of chicken and small, dark stains she didn't want to identify. Before she could react, the man's eyes locked on hers, and he smiled in a way that made her chest tighten. Suddenly, the lights flickered, then went out. The kitchen plunged into darkness. Sarah heard the fryer sizzle and hiss, then the sound of dragging, wet footsteps circling the room. The manager yelled, asking what was happening, but her voice was distant, muffled, like it came from underwater. When the lights flickered back on seconds later, the man and the cooler were gone. Sarah checked the security footage the next day, hoping to find some explanation. The video showed her serving the man, but there was no record of him ever entering the building. The cooler wasn't on the floor. And most terrifying of all, the footage captured a faint, shadowy hand reaching out from inside the fryer, disappearing as soon as the lights blinked. No one ever saw that man again. Sarah quit the job the next week, but sometimes late at night, she swears she can still smell that unmistakable greasy scent of fried chicken mixed with something rotten. And she knows somewhere out there, he's waiting for the next empty restaurant, the next late night shift, ready to return.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 4.
It was a quiet Thursday night when Maria decided to grab some dinner from the KFC near her apartment. She had just finished a late shift at the hospital, her body aching and her mind buzzing from the night's chaos. The streets were unusually empty, and the fluorescent lights of the KFC flickered slightly as she pulled into the drive-thru. She thought nothing of it, attributing it to the storm brewing in the distance. The line was long, but she didn't mind. When she finally reached the window, a man with a gaunt face and tired eyes handed her the food without a word. The usual polite exchange of greetings was replaced by an eerie silence that made her stomach twist with unease. She paid and drove off, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. Back in her apartment, she unpacked the food, her mouth watering despite the growing sense of dread. As she lifted the first piece of chicken, she noticed something strange. Beneath the crispy coating, one of the drumsticks had a dark, mottled texture that looked nothing like meat. Her heart raced as she leaned closer, and a sharp, metallic smell hit her nose. She gagged and dropped the piece, her mind racing through every possible explanation. Then came the knock at her door. At first, she froze, thinking it must be a neighbor, but the knocking grew persistent, heavy, almost deliberate. Her apartment building was quiet. Most people were asleep at this hour. She edged to the peephole and saw the same gaunt man from the drive-thru standing there, his face unreadable in the dim hallway light. "Is this yours?" he whispered, holding up a small plastic bag. Inside was the drumstick she had just dropped. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs felt like stone. Without warning, he vanished. The hallway was empty, silent, as if he had never been there. Trembling, she went back to her living room, only to find that the chicken she had eaten had never existed. The plate was empty, not a single crumb left behind, yet the smell lingered, metallic and foul. Over the next few days, Maria couldn't shake the memory. Every night, she'd hear scratching sounds coming from the vents, whispers she couldn't place, and sometimes the faint smell of something burnt and iron-like. When she tried to call the KFC to report the incident, the number had been disconnected, the store replaced on the map with a generic closed marker. She later discovered that the man who had handed her the chicken had disappeared months earlier. The news reported an employee vanishing mysteriously, last seen delivering orders late at night. Maria never went back to KFC, and she never forgot the taste of that chicken, a taste she described as wrong, like it belonged to something that wasn't meant to be eaten. Some nights, she swore she could see him outside her window, staring in. A reminder that sometimes what you think is just dinner might be something far worse.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 5.
It was late at night when a young man named Arif decided to grab some food after a long shift. The KFC on the edge of town was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights flickering slightly, casting long shadows across the empty tables. He ordered his usual meal, a bucket of chicken, fries, and a soda, and found a corner booth to eat in peace. As he bit into the crispy chicken, he noticed something strange in the reflection of the glass window. A figure was standing outside, motionless, just staring. He shook his head, thinking it was a trick of the light or a passerby waiting for a ride. But then he felt a cold draft against the back of his neck. Arif turned slowly and saw nothing, but the smell of fried chicken suddenly turned sour like rotting meat. His stomach churned, and he almost dropped his food. He told himself he was imagining things and tried to focus on his meal. A few minutes later, a staff member walked past, carrying a tray. Arif noticed their eyes, pale, almost entirely white, unblinking. The employee smiled at him, but the smile didn't reach their eyes. Something about them felt wrong. He decided to leave. As he got up, he heard whispering from the kitchen, faint at first, then growing louder. "You shouldn't be here, you shouldn't eat it." The voice wasn't human. Arif's heart raced and he bolted out the door. Outside, the figure he had seen through the window was gone. Relieved, he ran to his car, but when he looked in the rearview mirror, he saw it, standing silently on the curb, staring at him, the eyes of a corpse, unblinking and hollow. He never went back to that KFC. Weeks later, news surfaced about a staff member who had vanished without a trace. Employees said the last person who saw them reported that their eyes were changing, turning white and lifeless. Some claimed that whoever ate the special batch that night didn't leave fully alive either. Arif never told anyone what really happened, but he still gets chills when he smells fried chicken. Sometimes, late at night, he swears he sees those white eyes outside the corner of his window, watching.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 6.
Late one night, a young man named Arif decided to grab a late dinner at a 24-hour KFC near his college. The streets were empty, and a thick fog clung to the streetlights, making the place feel eerily isolated. He stepped inside, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly, and noticed the cashier was unusually quiet, her eyes darting nervously around the empty restaurant. Shrugging it off, he ordered his usual meal, a bucket of chicken, fries, and a drink. As he sat in a corner booth eating, he realized he was completely alone. No other customers, no staff moving in the kitchen, nothing. The TV behind the counter played an old, static-filled commercial over and over, but the audio was distorted, almost like someone was whispering underneath the music. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it was just a late-night glitch. Halfway through his meal, he noticed something odd in the reflection of the window. A shadowy figure was standing outside watching him, even though he could see the empty parking lot through the glass. His stomach twisted. He told himself it was his imagination, but then he noticed the shadow was moving, staying just at the edge of the fog, following him. Arif tried to finish eating quickly, but the chicken seemed to taste off, metallic, almost like blood. A sudden chill ran through him, and he felt an urge to leave immediately. When he got up, he saw smeared fingerprints on the glass doors, as if someone or something had pressed against it from the inside. But he had seen no one enter or exit. Heart pounding, he grabbed his bag and ran out. As he reached his car, he glanced back at the KFC, and the lights inside were off. The building looked abandoned, but in the window, he could see the faint outline of a figure sitting in his booth, hunched over his uneaten food. He slammed the door and drove away, never looking back. Weeks later, he found an online article detailing that same KFC location had been shut down years ago after a series of strange disappearances. Security footage had shown staff and customers entering late at night and never leaving. When Arif realized this, he froze. He had eaten there hours ago, but no one had been inside except him. The next day, he found traces of something sticky on his hands that smelled faintly of chicken and iron. He never went near a KFC again.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 7.
It started on a slow Thursday night at a KFC in a quiet part of town. The restaurant was almost empty, just a few customers scattered across the tables. The new night manager, a young guy named Ryan, was finishing up paperwork when the last customer left, leaving the place eerily silent. The overhead lights flickered once and then settled, but there was something unsettling about the way the shadows stretched across the empty chairs and counters. Ryan was walking to the back room to grab some cleaning supplies when he heard a faint scratching noise coming from the fryer area. He froze, thinking it was just the old pipes settling. But the scratching turned into a dragging sound, slow and deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. He stepped closer and saw, in the corner near the trash bins, a dark shape slinking along the ground. At first, he thought it was a stray rat, but as he shined his flashlight, he saw a figure crouched low to the ground. It was wearing a greasy, tattered version of the KFC uniform, but its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on strings. Ryan blinked, and for a moment, it just stared at him, its eyes glinting in the dim light. Then it moved toward him without a sound, each step deliberate. Ryan ran to the office and locked the door, but the figure was already there, on the other side of the glass, pressing its face against it. The features were distorted, like someone had tried to mimic the KFC mascot in flesh. Pale skin stretched tight, eyes too wide, a grin that split the face unnaturally. He called 911, but when the dispatcher asked what was happening, the line went dead, replaced by the sound of someone whispering finger-licking good over and over, closer and closer. When the police arrived, the place was empty. No sign of Ryan. Only the fryers were still on, and on the counter was a tray of fresh chicken, perfectly cooked, with handprints pressed into the breading. A few weeks later, another employee reported hearing footsteps and whispers in the same back room, and some say they've seen a figure in the uniform wandering the parking lot at night, staring through the windows, grinning, and muttering that same chilling slogan. No one knows what happened to Ryan, and employees refuse to work the night shift alone. Some say that the KFC mascot never really left, that it's just waiting, lurking in the shadows for the next unlucky person to smell the aroma of fried chicken and step inside.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 8.
Late one night, a young man named Arif was finishing his shift at a small KFC outlet in a quiet part of the city. He was alone. The other employees had already gone home, and the streets outside were empty, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows through the empty dining area. The smell of fried chicken hung in the air, clinging to everything. As he wiped down the counters, he noticed something strange in the kitchen's corner, a shadow moving, even though the storage room had been empty. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, but the feeling of being watched made his skin crawl. Then he heard the soft sound of footsteps behind him, though he knew he was alone. Arif turned quickly and saw a man standing by the fryer, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes hollow. The man said nothing but pointed at the cooler. Against his better judgment, Arif opened it and found something that made his stomach turn. Dozens of chicken buckets, but each one contained something that was not chicken. Fingers. Human fingers, shriveled and gray, mixed with the fries. Arif stumbled back, dropping the cooler door, and the sound echoed in the empty restaurant. The man smiled faintly, disappearing into the shadows as if he had never been there. Arif ran to the door, but it was locked. The lights flickered, and through the kitchen window, he saw figures moving outside, circling the building silently. He tried calling for help, but the phone line was dead. Panic took over as the figures pressed closer, their faces pale and grinning, whispering something he couldn't understand. The next morning, the manager arrived to find the KFC completely silent. Arif was gone, the doors locked from the inside, and the buckets in the cooler just looked like normal fried chicken again. Surveillance footage showed nothing out of the ordinary, just Arif cleaning the counters. The footage abruptly ended at 2:13 a.m., and when they tried to retrieve it, the tape was erased. No one could explain what happened that night, and Arif was never seen again. Some nights, other employees report feeling watched in that same KFC, hearing footsteps when no one is there, and sometimes, just sometimes, the faint sound of someone whispering, "Fresh, fresh," as if the fryer never stopped.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 9.
Late one night, a college student named Rafi decided to grab a quick meal from a 24-hour KFC near his campus. The streets were empty, and the fluorescent lights of the restaurant flickered intermittently as he stepped inside. The place was eerily quiet, far quieter than usual for a late-night fast food joint. The smell of fried chicken hung in the air, but it was off somehow, more pungent, like something had gone bad. Rafi went up to the counter, where a young employee stared at him silently, expressionless, her eyes unsettlingly wide. She didn't speak, she just handed him a bag. When he tried to thank her, she tilted her head slowly and whispered something so faint he couldn't catch it. Feeling uneasy, he paid and walked toward the exit, glancing over his shoulder. The restaurant was completely empty, no other customers in sight. Back in his dorm room, he opened the bag. Inside, the food looked normal, crispy chicken, fries, a biscuit. But when he lifted a piece of chicken, he noticed a small slip of paper tucked under it. On it was a single line, "I see you." At first, he laughed nervously, thinking it was some kind of joke. But as he reached for his drink, he noticed something moving in the corner of his room. Rafi froze. A shadow lingered near his closet, and though he couldn't see a face, he could feel eyes boring into him. He bolted to the door, yanking it open, but the hallway outside was dark and silent. His phone had no signal, no Wi-Fi, nothing. Panicking, he ran back into his room, only to find the bag of chicken on his bed, untouched, as if it had never left the restaurant. The note now had another line, freshly written, "You didn't leave." Terrified, he grabbed the bag and threw it into the dumpster outside, hoping to be done with it. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined the employee standing in the corner, silently watching, whispering the same words over and over. When he finally dared to fall asleep, he dreamt of KFC, the restaurant's lights flickering, the smell of fried chicken now mixed with something metallic, something alive. And he woke up to find a single fried drumstick on his desk, perfectly cooked, with another note, "Next time, don't run." Rafi never went back to that KFC, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the employee was always just outside, waiting in the dark, patient, silent, always watching.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 10.
It was a late Friday night when a young man named Arif, exhausted from his part-time job, decided to grab a bite at the local KFC. The restaurant was nearly empty, dimly lit, and silent except for the hum of the fryer. He went to the counter and ordered a bucket of chicken, craving something hot and greasy to calm his nerves. The cashier, a pale man with sunken eyes, barely looked at him as he punched in the order. Something about the way he moved, mechanical, slow, made Arif shiver, but he shook it off. When the food arrived, the smell was unusually strong, almost metallic. and the chicken looked darker than usual, greasy with a sheen that seemed off. As he sat down in the corner booth, he noticed something odd. There was a faint smear of what looked like dried blood on one of the drumsticks. He frowned, thinking it was probably just sauce, but the thought wouldn't leave him. Midway through his meal, Arif's stomach twisted. A sharp, nauseating taste made him gag. He looked at the chicken again and noticed tiny black specks crawling on the surface like insects, but when he blinked, they vanished. Panic set in, and he tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't move. He felt a cold presence behind him and turned slowly. The cashier was standing in the shadows near the door, silently watching, and Arif realized his eyes had been following him the entire time. Heart pounding, he reached for his phone to call for help, but the screen went black. The humming of the fryer turned into a low, guttural growl. He felt something brush against his shoulder, warm, wet, sticky. And when he looked, there was a long, bloody handprint smeared across the back of his jacket, as if someone or something had touched him while he ate. Terrified, he bolted for the exit, only to find the doors locked. The lights flickered violently, and from the kitchen came a sound of chopping. Not chicken, but something heavier, something alive. He could hear wet, tearing sounds mixed with the fryer's hiss. Desperate, he smashed a window and jumped out, landing hard on the pavement, bruised and bleeding. When he looked back, the KFC was empty, silent, and the sign flickered as if nothing had happened. The smell of grease lingered, but underneath it was something far fouler, coppery and iron strong, like blood. He never went back. Weeks later, news surfaced about the same KFC. Health inspectors had found hidden rooms in the kitchen, walls stained dark, and surveillance footage showing employees dragging something large and wriggling into the back storage, never to emerge. No one knew what it was. Arif never wanted to know either. Every time he passes by a KFC, he feels that same cold presence, watching from the shadows, waiting for the next customer who doesn't notice the hands reaching from the fryer.